When riots broke out, he restored peace without bullets. When terrorists hijacked a plane, he negotiated to bring hostages home. When militants occupied sacred ground, he outsmarted them from inside. When India needed a stronger security policy, he helped reshape it. Through crisis after crisis, one name quietly kept appearing in the background. Ajit Doval. He works in silence. He avoids the spotlight. But when the nation faces danger, he steps forward. This is not just a biography. This is the story of strategy, risk, power, and national security. The man behind some of India's most critical security decisions. And today, we uncover his story. Let's begin. January 20th, 1945. In the hills of Pauri Garhwal, Uttarakhand, Ajit Kumar Doval was born to Major G.N. Doval, an Indian Army officer. Discipline wasn't optional in his household. It was everything. Frequent military transfers meant young Ajit's childhood spanned across India. He attended the Indian military boarding school in Ajmer, an institution that bred leaders. In 1967, at 22, Doval earned his master's in economics from Agra University. He could have chosen comfort. Instead, he chose service, on the front lines, not behind a desk. In 1968, he cracked the grueling UPSC exam on his first attempt and joined the Indian Police Service. After training, he was posted to Kottayam, Kerala, but his first real test was just around the corner. December 28, 1971. A man threw a shoe from a hotel in Thalassery, Kerala. Just a shoe. But in a town already full of tension, that small act became a spark. Within hours, two religious groups began fighting. Shops were looted, homes were burned. The streets turned violent. The situation became so bad that even the police were scared to enter the area. The region was on the edge of complete chaos. Kerala's Home Minister, K. Karunakaran, needed someone brave, someone who would not panic, someone who could think calmly in the middle of violence. Senior officers suggested the name of a young officer who had just joined the service, Ajit Doval. January 2nd, 1972. Ajit Doval arrived in Thalassery. The streets were empty, shops were closed, fear was everywhere. Most officers would have called for more police forces, but Doval believed in strategy, not force. He walked through the violent areas alone. He carried no weapons. He spoke to shopkeepers. He spoke to local people. Slowly, he collected information. He found out who was leading the riots on both sides. Then he did something unexpected. He met those leaders face to face. No guns, no threats, just a conversation. He listened carefully. He understood something important. The main problem was not religion. It was the looting. Both sides had lost property. Both sides were angry. So Doval made a simple promise. Stop the violence, and I will recover your stolen goods and return them. It was a big risk. If he failed, the violence could become worse. But he kept his promise. He found the stolen items. He returned them to their owners. Within days, tensions began to ease. Over the following weeks, Doval continued his work in Thalassery, maintaining peace and ensuring the settlement held. By the time he left in mid-1972, order had been fully restored. No bullets were fired, no lives were lost. When his report reached Delhi, people were surprised. How did such a young officer control a riot without force? Even Prime Minister Indira Gandhi noticed him. In mid-1972, Ajit Doval was called to Delhi and joined the Intelligence Bureau's Direct Operations Wing. He was no longer just a police officer. He was entering the world of intelligence, the world of spies, and his real journey had just begun. While Ajit Doval was beginning his journey in the world of intelligence, India was facing a severe crisis in its northeastern region. Mizoram at that time was not a separate state. It was part of Assam, and it was burning. The crisis began with nature. A devastating drought hit Mizoram, destroying crops and leaving thousands of people starving. The local population demanded compensation from the government, 1.5 lakh rupees. It was a reasonable demand, but the government refused, and that refusal ignited a fire that would burn for years. A man named Laldenga stepped forward. He was a local leader, charismatic and passionate. He formed an organization called the Mizo National Famine Front, which later became the Mizo National Front, or MNF. Laldenga spoke for the people. He criticized the government. He raised his voice against injustice, and the people rallied behind him. But the situation took a darker turn when the government of Assam introduced a controversial policy. Only those who could speak Assamese would be eligible for government jobs. For the Mizo people, who had their own language and culture, this was unacceptable. It was an attack on their identity, and Laldenga stood firmly against it. The people's support for him grew stronger. And then, the government made a catastrophic mistake. They dismissed 2 entire battalions of the Assam Rifles, a paramilitary force that had a majority of Mizo soldiers. Hundreds of trained, armed, and angry young men were suddenly unemployed. They returned to their villages, furious and humiliated. Among them were 7 highly skilled commanders. These were not ordinary soldiers. These were trained fighters, and they were ready to take up arms. These 7 commanders joined Laldenga, and together they transformed the MNF from a political movement into a full-blown insurgency. They began attacking government installations. They launched violent assaults on the border security force. They replaced the Indian flag with their own. And then, in a bold and shocking move, they declared Mizoram an independent nation. India had a massive problem. The local population supported Laldenga and the MNF. Any military action would be seen as an attack on the Mizo people themselves. It would only fuel more anger, more violence. The situation was a ticking time bomb, and that's when the Indian government called in Ajit Doval. Doval arrived in Mizoram as the head of the Subsidiary Intelligence Bureau. He didn't come with an army. He didn't come with weapons. He came with something far more powerful: his mind. Within a week, Doval had gathered critical intelligence. He learned that Laldenga's power came from these 7 commanders. Without them, Laldenga was just a political leader with no real muscle. But Doval also learned something else, something crucial. The 7 commanders in Laldenga were not on good terms. There was tension, there was conflict, and where there is conflict, there is opportunity. Doval made a bold decision. He would go to the commanders himself. He would infiltrate their base, and he would turn them against Laldenga. The 7 commanders had set up their base deep in the mountains of Myanmar. It was a remote, heavily guarded location. Getting there was dangerous. Staying there was even more dangerous. But Doval, disguised as a local operative, entered the mountains. He began talking to the commanders. Slowly, carefully. He didn't rush. He didn't push. He just listened. He built trust. And then he became their friend. Doval started drinking alcohol with them. He shared meals with them. He even invited them to his own home, where his wife cooked pork for them. She had no idea that the men sitting at her dining table were armed insurgents. She had no idea that her husband was risking his life every single day. Over the course of 2 years, from 1972 to 1974, Ajit Doval worked on these 7 commanders. He explained to them that they were fighting a losing battle. He told them that the Indian army would eventually crush them. He painted a picture of their future: dead, forgotten, and defeated. But he also offered them an alternative, a way out, a way to survive and even thrive. He promised them that if they joined hands with India, Mizoram would be declared a separate state. He promised them political power. He promised them ministerial positions. He promised them dignity and respect. And most importantly, he promised them that the issues of the common people would be resolved. One by one, the commanders began to listen. One by one, they began to believe. And one by one, 6 out of the 7 commanders agreed to join India. The moment those 6 commanders switched sides, Laldenga's power collapsed. He had no army. He had no muscle. He was left with no choice but to negotiate peace with the Indian government. Years later, journalist Saikat Datta interviewed Laldenga. And on record, Laldenga admitted, "Ajit Doval took 6 of my commanders. I had no choice left." Mizoram became a separate state. Laldenga became its chief minister, and Ajit Doval was credited with executing one of the most brilliant intelligence operations in Indian history. He had turned India's enemies into India's allies, without firing a single bullet. While Ajit Doval was working in Mizoram, another important event was happening. This time in Sikkim. Sikkim was a small kingdom in the Himalayas. It was ruled by King Palden Thondup Namgyal. The king married an American woman named Hope Cook. At that time, there were concerns in India that foreign influence was increasing in Sikkim. Prime Minister Indira Gandhi did not want any outside power to influence a region so close to India's borders. She spoke to R.N. Kao, the head of RAW. A plan was made. Instead of using the army, they would use politics. Ajit Doval was sent to Sikkim. He met a local leader named Kazi Lendip Dorji, who led the Sikkim National Congress. Doval helped him organize politically and gain public support. Elections were held. Kazi won and became the Prime Minister of Sikkim. Later, Sikkim held a public vote. The people were asked if they wanted to join India. In 1975, most people voted in favor of joining India. Sikkim officially became a state of India. For his work in Mizoram and Sikkim, Ajit Doval received the President's Police Medal for Gallantry, and he received it much earlier than usual because of his achievements. In 1974, India conducted its first nuclear test. After this, Pakistan also started developing nuclear weapons. India needed information about Pakistan's nuclear plans. Ajit Doval was sent to Pakistan under diplomatic cover. Officially, he worked at the Indian High Commission, but secretly, he was gathering intelligence. He lived in Pakistan for 6 to 7 years. At times, he disguised himself, even as a beggar, to move near sensitive areas like the Kahuta nuclear facility. He collected information quietly and sent it back to India. Life as a spy was extremely dangerous. Twice, he almost got caught. Once, someone questioned him about his appearance at a shrine. Another time, someone noticed that his fake beard was slipping during a public event. Both times he stayed calm and avoided suspicion. For years he lived in constant danger. But he survived. And the information he gathered helped India understand Pakistan's nuclear program better. By the late 1980s, Punjab was in serious trouble. The pain from Operation Blue Star in 1984 was still fresh. The Sikh community was hurt. The government knew it could not allow another attack inside the Golden Temple. In 1988, armed militants entered the Golden Temple and took control of a room inside. They believed the government would not dare to act again. Rajiv Gandhi was prime minister at that time. He gave clear orders. The militants must be removed, but no damage should happen to the Golden Temple. Ajit Doval was called back to India. The operation was named Operation Black Thunder. It was led by KPS Gill and Ajit Doval. Security forces surrounded the temple, but no one knew how to remove the militants without entering by force. Doval took a huge risk. According to accounts that emerged later, he gathered intelligence by moving around the temple area, at times in disguise. Using his knowledge of Urdu from his time in Pakistan, he reportedly made contact with the militants and gained their trust. The exact details of how intelligence was gathered remain classified. But what is clear is that Doval obtained crucial information about the militants' positions, weapons, and leadership structure. This intelligence proved vital to the operation's success. It was a dangerous lie. If they doubted him, they would kill him. But they believed him. Doval gained their trust. He moved in and out of the temple, secretly gathering details, where the militants were hiding, how many weapons they had, and who their leaders were. After collecting all the information, he called in NSG commandos at night. They quietly replaced other forces outside. Now Doval had everything needed to finish the operation, without harming the temple. He cut off the water and electricity supply to the Golden Temple. It was peak summer. The heat was extreme. The militants had no water, no power, and no comfort. As the days passed, their morale became weak. On May 15th, the top militant leader, Jagger Singh, came out briefly to get water. A sniper was ready. One shot, and he was killed. With their leader gone and their strength fading, the militants were close to giving up. That is when Doval went inside again. He spoke to them calmly. He told them surrender was the only way to survive. After days of pressure and talks on May 18, 1988, all the militants surrendered. No bullets were fired inside the temple. No civilians were harmed. The operation ended peacefully. Ajit Doval had achieved something rare. He ended a dangerous siege without large-scale violence and protected the temple from further damage. December 24, 1999. It was supposed to be a normal flight. Indian Airlines or Flight YC-814 took off from Kathmandu, Nepal. It was going to New Delhi. Around 170 to 180 passengers were on board. Families were returning home. Business travelers were going back to work. It was an ordinary day, but within minutes of entering Indian airspace, everything changed. 5 terrorists from the group Harkat al-Mujahideen hijacked the plane. They had knives, grenades, and guns. They took control of the cockpit. The passengers were terrified. The terrorists ordered the pilot to fly to Pakistan. The pilot, Captain Devi Sharan, told them there was not enough fuel to reach Pakistan. So the terrorists decided to land in Amritsar first, refuel, and then fly again. The plane landed in Amritsar, but it stayed there for some time. The terrorists became suspicious. They thought the Indian government might be planning something. So they forced the pilot to take off again. They flew to Lahore, Pakistan. At first, Pakistan did not allow them to land. Later, the plane landed. After that, it flew to Dubai. The plane refueled there. Finally, on December 25, 1999, the plane landed in Kandahar, Afghanistan. India was shocked. An Indian passenger plane had been hijacked. Indian citizens were trapped in another country. Families of the passengers were crying on television. The media was asking questions. The government was under huge pressure. India sent an officer, A.R. Ghanshyam, to Kandahar to gather information. The terrorists warned him. They said India must send a negotiation team immediately. If their demands were not accepted, they would start killing passengers. The Indian government quickly formed a team of 7 negotiators. Ajit Doval was included in that team. There were 2 reasons. First, between 1971 and 1999, Doval had handled more than 15 hijacking cases. He had experience. Second, the government trusted him. The team reached Kandahar. The situation was very tense. The terrorists kept changing their demands. First, they asked for 36 militants to be released from Indian prisons. Then they asked for $200 million. Then they changed their demands again. Doval told them to clearly write down their final demands. The terrorists wrote it on paper and threw it out of the plane. The final demand was, release 36 militants and pay $200 million. India first refused, but there was no easy solution. If India tried a military operation, it would need to use Pakistani airspace. India did not trust Pakistan. There was a risk that the terrorists would get the information. If the operation failed, the terrorists could blow up the plane. All the passengers could die. Families were protesting. The media was pressuring the government. The whole country was watching. Ajit Doval negotiated day and night. He spoke calmly. He argued. He tried to reduce their demands. Slowly, he convinced them to reduce the number from 36 militants to just 3. It was still a painful decision. Releasing even one terrorist was difficult, but saving 170 innocent lives was more important. India agreed. 3 militants were released. All the passengers came back home safely. But for India, it was a painful moment. And for Ajit Doval, it left a deep impact. After this, he worked to strengthen India's security system. He helped create the Multi-Agency Center, MAC, and the Joint Task Force on Intelligence, JTFI. These systems improved coordination between intelligence agencies and helped India respond faster to threats. He did not want India to ever face such a situation again. By 2004, Ajit Doval had worked for India for more than 30 years. He had taken many risks. He had done many secret operations. According to rules, he was supposed to become the director of the Intelligence Bureau. But politics changed everything. In July 2004, the Congress Party came to power. Some leaders believed Doval had played a role in political changes in Kashmir that hurt Congress. They also believed he was close to BJP leaders. When it was time to appoint the new IB director, Congress appointed Ajit Doval, but reduced his term from 2 years to only 8 months. Many people believed this was done to limit his power. In 2005, Ajit Doval retired from government service. But for him, retirement was not the end. In 2005, Doval got information that Dawood Ibrahim, India's most wanted criminal, would attend his daughter's wedding reception in Dubai. This was a rare chance. Doval contacted Chota Rajan, who was Dawood's former partner and later his enemy. Rajan hated Dawood. When Doval suggested a plan against him, Rajan agreed. 2 men were sent to India. Doval arranged their training. He helped them get fake passports. He planned everything carefully. But there was a problem. The Mumbai police had been searching for these men for a long time. They were wanted criminals. Before the plan could move forward, Mumbai police officers reached Delhi and arrested them. Doval had no official position at that time. He had no power to stop the arrest. The operation failed. Dawood escaped again. It was a big setback for Doval, but he did not stop. In 2008, Narendra Modi, who was the chief minister of Gujarat at that time, invited Doval to help start a university focused on internal security and police training. Doval accepted. Raksha Shakti University was created. In 2009, Doval helped to start the Vivekananda International Foundation, also called VIF. It was a think tank that studied national security and global affairs. It organized seminars and published reports. In 2011, VIF published a report about black money kept in foreign banks. This report created a big political debate. Soon, anti-corruption protests started across India. In 2014, the BJP won the national elections. One of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's first major decisions was to appoint Ajit Doval as India's national security advisor. This was unusual because most previous NSAs came from the Foreign Service. But Modi chose someone from the intelligence background. When Ajit Doval became national security advisor in 2014, India's security approach began to change. India became more active, not just reactive. In June 2014, 46 Indian nurses were trapped in Iraq during conflict with ISIS. The situation was very dangerous. Doval played an important role in planning their safe return. All 46 nurses came back safely. After that, several major actions took place. In 2015, Indian forces carried out an operation across the border in Myanmar. In 2016, after the Uri attack, India carried out surgical strikes across the line of control. In 2019, after the Pulwama attack, India carried out airstrikes in Balakot. In August 2019, Article 370 was removed, changing the status of Jammu and Kashmir. These were big decisions. Earlier, India mostly followed a defensive policy. It responded to attacks. Under this new approach, India would defend itself, but if attacked, it would respond strongly. This changed the security situation in the region. India showed that it would not stay silent after attacks. Ajit Doval's journey is not just the story of a spy. It is not just the story of a police officer. It is not even just the story of a national security advisor. It is the story of a man who chose the shadows over the spotlight, a man who made decisions where the cost of failure was measured in lives, a man who walked into danger so others would not have to. From riot-torn streets in Kerala to insurgent camps in the Northeast, from the nuclear shadows of Pakistan to the negotiation table in Kandahar, from the Golden Temple siege to shaping India's modern security doctrine. Again and again, when the nation faced crisis, his name appeared quietly in the background. He has been praised as a master strategist. He has been criticized by opponents. He has faced political resistance. He has faced controversy. But through it all, one thing remained constant: his role at the center of India's security decisions. Love him or question him, ignore him or admire him. His impact on India's national security landscape cannot be denied. Because national security is not built in speeches. It is built in silence, in long nights, in secret briefings, in decisions the public may never fully see. Ajit Doval represents a generation of officers who believe that service to the nation comes before recognition, before comfort, before fear. And as India continues to evolve in a rapidly changing world, facing new threats, new technologies, and new challenges, the systems, strategies, and structures built over decades will continue to shape the country's future. History will debate his methods. Politics will debate his decisions. But history will also record one simple fact. For over 4 decades, Ajit Doval stood at the front lines of India's security, whether visible or invisible, and that legacy will remain. If you found this story powerful, share your thoughts in the comments. Do you see Ajit Doval as a strategist who reshaped India's security doctrine, or as a controversial figure in a complex political landscape? Let's discuss. If you enjoyed this deep dive into India's security history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because there are many more untold stories waiting to be uncovered. This was the story of Ajit Doval, and this was the story behind the strategy. Thank you for watching.